I'm back after having to deal with handling my physical health. I might end up making a video about that later. And I'm actually going to do the thing that I said I was going to do in the last video, which is why the discovery arc was before the trauma arc, or why I believe it is important for you to go through a self-discovery journey before you start trying to process or heal your trauma. Now, when it came to me trying to figure out like which arc I wanted to do specifically and what order I wanted to do them in, yes, one, I did choose to only do 3 because I feel like it's the main 3 that I've been having to deal with or having to process through myself. But also because 3 is usually a decent number to end on. The third one, funny enough, is that while I was trying to figure out how to properly categorize the things that I have looked through within myself internally, they all end up in one of the 3 categories. Sadly enough, family and trauma tend to overlap. That was kind of because no one in my family recognized my neurodivergence in general, or the fact that my brain specifically worked a certain way. It could also be the fact that they recognized that my brain worked a certain way, but also did not want to put in the work to try to understand the way that my brain worked. Just wanted me to go ahead and tell them what's going on. And it's even worse because I didn't even know what was going on. Then this entire thing about wanting to have control over things, which is probably a good reason as to why I was yeah, I don't even feel comfortable in telling you what's going on, even if I did know. I'm not talking about the family arc, though. We're specifically explaining why the discovery arc came before the trauma arc. And the first way I am going to answer that question is you have to figure out who or what you are and what you personally believe in before you go through your trauma, because it's best to have very specific lenses before you go ahead and just raw dog processing your trauma. First, it's establishing a sense of self. Do you even know who you were before the trauma? Or did the trauma start before you were even conscious? Before you were even able to put memories together? I've already talked about that in the family arc, so we're moving on. The second thing, which I pointed out earlier, are you neurodivergent? Or do you have some sort of mental diagnosis, such as autism or ADHD, or pretty much any type of thing that can be put under the mental illness category or mental disability category that kind of changes the way that you specifically act, react, respond, what have you? Or is it literally just CPTSD? Because that part specifically has been helping me a lot when it came to organizing where my part in the trauma that I've gone through comes in, and what I can do to minimize its generalized effects. And the third thing is making sure you're looking at things through the right lens. Again, having to figure out who you are, what type of problems that comes with that, what you personally believe, how that clashes with everything else, creating chaos, disorder, what have you. And my first example, not as surprising, is my own childhood. The main theme I originally noticed was the amount of instances of conflict I dealt with, aka constantly being told I wasn't doing things right when I actually was. Mainly by adults. I accepted the labels people placed me under because they all said similar, if not the same thing. Me being lazy, me being introverted, me being anxious. I've already done an entire video about that. Even the research that I specifically did when I was doing research into psychology and stuff were giving me similar answers. But that's kind of because I didn't have enough knowledge on either ADHD or autism back then. Now I'm starting to recognize that there are a lot of overlap within the two of them, which is the reason why I tend to say both of them at the same time, because have not been officially diagnosed with either, but it's like I'm also using a lot of the systems that people usually give to those that have ADHD or are autistic that's supposed to help them, and it's been helping me. So to people that give out that information, I would love to thank you for that. And like the generalized thing there is I spent so much of my time thinking, oh, if only I could. Essentially blaming or shaming myself for being me. Because other people have been blaming and shaming me for being me, but that's beside the point. But the second example is actually the main reason as to why we kind of had to move. The first thing I'm going to say with this example is it is impossible to heal in the same place you were hurt, harmed, or traumatized. Especially if the people in said environment or the environment itself hasn't changed. Where I was, under the roof that I was living, there were like two separate traumatic loops going on at the same time. For those who don't know what traumatic loops are, they're essentially cycles of trauma that are relatively consistent because the person themselves that had started the cycle itself hasn't changed. Well, one person was trying to get me to do things their way by any means besides being direct, essentially treating home as if it was their workplace, which makes sense. To some extent, I'm not saying it was the right thing to do. And one person actively ignoring me unless there were other people around, and then acting as if none of that had happened or that any of it mattered to them, which honestly irritated the heck out of me, so I just decided to disengage in general. And constantly having to fight the same battle over and over again, having me feel like I was going insane because nothing changed. And in fact, the only saving grace in that situation was the fact that I wasn't the only one affected by those two people. And I think the funnier thing is, if I hadn't worked on intentionally building a sense of self, I probably would have given into both of them, if not at the very least one of them. But in those situations, with those two examples, I specifically had to figure out who I was, what I was essentially having to handle when it came to my brain, and how to best navigate things to not stress me out so much, but that I can actually get stuff done. So the discovery part was very important before I started handling the trauma. It allows you to see the truth more clearly, instead of looking at it through warped lenses. In those situations, if I hadn't done work on building that sense of self, building that understanding of who I was, and deep acceptance of who I ended up finding out I was, it would have been harder for me to stand my ground because it wouldn't have made sense. But now I'm here, I don't have to deal with those two people as much, if at all. I'm slightly better mentally and emotionally. I am having to deal with a lot of other health issues that probably was just triggered even more due to the stress, or due to the release of stress. The thing I did not realize how badly it would end up affecting me is, like, once you're out of this space that has, once you're away from the traumatized space, your body is slowly getting back to not constantly pumping cortisol through your veins. You end up having to deal with a lot of, well, at least for me, I've had to deal with a lot of crying episodes. But it's not just like you cry more. Your body starts recognizing, hey, it is safe. Now let's go ahead and release all of this pent-up stress, anxiety, and whatever, by putting you through essentially physical heck in a handbasket. And that could manifest physically in several different ways. From you just getting sick, like a flu or cold type sick, to making any of your, like, chronic illnesses slash, like, general health issues worse. I know I ended up saying I was probably going to end up talking about this in a later video, but I have time in this one. There's like a skin condition slash, yeah, there's this type of skin condition that I recognize I might be suffering from, and I have had to handle, like, for most of the time last week, I've had to handle caring for my skin because there had been flare-ups from said condition. And what I didn't recognize, outside of the fact that there are a lot of other factors, is that me trying to have my body calm down from having to be in such an environment meant that I would end up getting more flare-ups caused by said skin condition, where I literally had to basically say, okay, I'm putting everything on hold until this is handled, which I will go ahead and which I did, like, give myself a pat on the back for. So now that we're at the end here, please don't forget to like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell to be notified of whenever I post. And don't forget to put any of your questions, comments, concerns, or ideas for future videos in the comment section down below. With all of that being said, my name is Toki, aka your local internet friend, and this is Toki saying Toki out.